Hey everyone, we are doing a Facebook Live broadcast now, and we are getting ready to be joined by certified plant-based health coach Sharon McRae. Some of you, hopefully many of you now, probably know that I've been for the last 40 days on a plant-based whole foods journey. If you guys follow me over at drmondo.org and on my Facebook website, Dr. Mondo, you'll see that, again, I've been in support of a lot of different approaches over the years. A lot of different people have really joined me, offer help to people to get in shape, not just get in shape, but also rewrite their story. And that's what I've done, some online programs based around. That's what my counseling practice is based around. So for me, I've never wanted to really pick one lane of nutrition to say, this is it, this is it. As Sharon McRae joins us here. Hey, Sharon, how are you?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Looks like we got everything set up just the way we needed it to. I was telling the Facebook following here about how, of course, as a licensed therapist, my mission has been to help people with the emotional side of their weight loss transformation or with just their health journey. And I've always been so tentative to really pick a lane in terms of endorsing a certain type of nutrition approach or exercise approach. And part of the reason I do that is because scope of practice is so important to me. I'm not a licensed nutritionist. I'm not, a medical doctor. So with this, now being public about going plant-based whole foods for the last now over 40 days has been something different for me. And a lot of people have seen some of my posts online about that at drmondo.org, the blog post on my Facebook. But this is cool because now I get a chance to really show what's happening behind the scenes, which has been your support, your coaching. And I guess that's kind of where I wanted to jump in today. I want to give people, as you called it, a primer on if you're considering going plant-based whole foods, if you've heard about this big vegan movement, is it just the newest fad, or is this something that's going to stay around? And why should people consider it? Why have I considered it? We'll get into all of that, including taking your questions here today on this Facebook Live. So again, Sharon, just so excited to have you join us. And can you tell some people a little bit more about who you are and what you do and how you got into doing the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm a certified health coach, and I'm also a nutrition and cooking instructor for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. That's PCRM's Food for Life program. In addition to that, I run a local meetup group in my community called the Columbia, Maryland Forks Over Knives Meetup Group, and we currently have over 1,350 members, which is very exciting.
Awesome.
So I'm a mom of 3 teenagers and a wife, and I got into this very gradually, starting in my late teens, and really my motivation was just simply that I was squeamish. I started to make the connection between the roast beef on my plate and the cattle that I would see on a news report. And I stopped eating red meat in my late teens. And then in my 20s, I decided to pursue a degree in biology and started doing dissections, unfortunately, in my classes, and started to dissect the chicken and turkey that were on my plate. And so at that point, I gave up poultry. In my 30s, my husband and I decided to have a family, and I was concerned about mercury and toxicity from the ocean. And so that was when I gave up seafood and fish. And then in my 40s, my mom, who had been battling breast cancer for about 26 years, so she was diagnosed in her 40s when I was in my 20s, she finally got metastatic breast cancer and was in the end stages of her life. And I had an epiphany one day. I was spending very long days at Johns Hopkins Hospital in the cancer ward, which is a horrible place to be. I hope no one watching ever has to be there. And it was one of the most stressful times of my life. And I remember going to the pantry, which is the place where they keep all the food for the patients. And there was yogurt and ice cream and cheese and Jello and, all these types of things that they typically give cancer patients. And I literally heard a voice in my head that said, stop eating animal protein. Now, at the time, I was a vegetarian, so I was still eating lots of cheese. It was one of my favorite foods, and I was still eating egg whites. Couldn't stand to eat the yolk because of all the dissections I had done in school. So I was still eating egg white omelets, lots of cheese, yogurt, things like that. And when I heard that voice, I thought, oh my God, that means vegan. That's way too restrictive
Yeah.
for me. I can never do that. And I was sort of debating back and forth in my head silently with this voice. And I decided I would try this for 2 weeks and see what happened, but I wouldn't let
Mm.
anyone know because I didn't think I could ever give up cheese. I mean, it was literally, it was my favorite food. I would get pizza and pull the cheese to the bottom of the crust because I thought the crust was the terrible part, which in retrospect, it's not so good either. But,
Right.
but I would just eat
I'm
the
nodding
cheese.
because I'm right there with you.
I
So yeah,
know,
keep going.
I know you are. But I would just eat the cheese and the bottom of the crust. And my dad would say to me, why don't you just go to the grocery store and buy a bag of cheese? Why bother ordering a pizza?
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, but it was my favorite food. So I decided to become a closet vegan for 2 weeks. And when my kids at the time were young, they were probably about 9 and 5, something like that. I have twins now that are 18 and a son. My twins are girls, and a son who just turned 15. So they were pretty young at the time. And my son would say things like, do you want to get pizza tonight? And I would say, no, I really don't want it. You all can have it, but I just don't feel like eating it. And he would say, do you want an omelet? No, I'm going to eat something different. Again, I didn't know really that there was a health connection here. I was just doing this sort of just to honor that voice I had heard. And at the end of 2 weeks, I'm not sure how quite to explain it, but I felt a lot better. It was like I didn't have the sick feeling in my stomach anymore that I always got when what I was doing was not really in alignment with what I thought was right. And I felt lighter. I felt more energetic. I just felt overall better. I felt like my mental clarity had improved. And so I came out as vegan. And
Wow.
at the time, again, I didn't know about this health connection. So my mom had recently passed away, and I had started off my career as a scientist. I had a degree in biology, like I said, and I worked in a molecular biology lab and then in a company that made molecular biology reagents for many years. And when my girls were born, I had to give up that job because they wouldn't let me work part-time. So I then became, it sounds really crazy, a crazy diversion, but I became a makeup artist, a freelance makeup artist. And
Oh,
it was
wow.
fun and frivolous and creative, and it was just a different side of my brain. But I started to have this calling that I was missing something. I was missing that intellectual stimulation. And I'd always been thought of as the food police by my friends. I was always very health conscious, very exercise conscious and health conscious. And so I started seeing these emails from this school called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And I decided to pursue this training and get my certification as a health coach, because that way I'd have a badge. I was always the food police. Now I would have a badge.
Might as well go into that line of work. It was your calling. Yeah.
Exactly. So I became a health coach. And at that time, someone said to me during my training, hey, have you ever read this book called The China Study by T. Colin Campbell? And I had never heard of this. They said, you really should read it. So here I am. I recently lost my mom. I start reading this book, and it talks about how casein, the most potent, or the predominant protein in dairy, is a very potent cancer promoter. And I remember putting down the book and running out to my kids and sitting them down and just, basically telling them, they were 10 and 6 at the time. And I said, and they were raised vegetarian, I should say that. They were raised vegetarian, but with a very heavy reliance on dairy, because our pediatrician told us, just make sure they get calcium and protein. They can get all they need from the dairy, and a lot of prepared and packaged foods. One of the common dinners in our house was Amy's frozen cheese pizza and a bag of frozen peas. That was what we thought was a complete meal. And our kids had that very often. They had vegan cookies, vegan cakes, all those sorts of things, just the vegan version, or sorry, not the vegan version, but the natural organic version. Yeah. So I read this and I'm flipping out, and I tell the kids this. Now I should back up and say, when I told them I was vegan, they all cried. And I said, look, I said, I'm not taking away anything for you. I'm not changing anything for you.
Wow.
At that time, I wasn't, because again, I didn't know about the health connection. But once I found out about it, I said, I'm very sorry, but this has to stop. You have to stop eating cheese and yogurt and ice cream. And they cried like I took away their best friend and their favorite toy all in that one moment. And I was just very determined. I said, look, we've got a very strong family history of cancer. Not only did my mother succumb to cancer, but my father is a kidney cancer survivor. One grandmother died of uterine cancer, the other of liver cancer. My father's brother died of testicular cancer that metastasized to the bones. His mother's sister died of brain cancer. So it's all through my family. My mother's brother is now battling cancer. So it's all through my family. On my husband's side, his mother is a colon cancer survivor. His father's battling leukemia, and his brother had prostate cancer. So it's everywhere throughout both of our families. And I knew that my kids had a very strong genetic predisposition. So once I learned this information, there was no other way for me. And my husband, very fortunately, was completely on board. And he was not initially going along with us because he held on to his salmon. He thought he needed his omega-3 fatty acids from his salmon. So every once in a while, I'd open up the trunk of his car and I'd see a package of salmon there.
The trunk of his car, like he was really trying to hide this from you.
That was
you
his
really
hide.
were the police.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah. He knew that you'd have to have a warrant to actually get it. That's great. Okay.
He was eating it in the office. And then the movie Forks Over Knives came out. And for any of your people watching who have not seen that documentary, I can't recommend it highly enough. Please.
Neither can I. Yeah, that was the one for me.
Go on Netflix, watch that movie. You won't regret it. And when the movie came out, they did a premiere in Silver Spring, and Dr. Neil Barnard, who's the founder of PCRM, was there. And I remember bringing my husband up to Dr. Barnard at the time I knew him and saying, hey, can you talk to my husband about salmon? And needless to say, that was the last time he ever ate fish. So he's been completely on board. And then we refined things. So initially we were doing a lot of the packaged and processed vegan foods, you know, the substitutes, the Daya or Daya cheese, however you pronounce it. Then I read a book by Dr. Joel Fuhrman called Disease Proof Your Child. And I read about how what you feed your child in the first 10 years of life is the most important predictor of their later life health. And their risk of cancer and type 2 diabetes and autoimmune disease and all these other things. So at that point, I cleaned it up and I took out the processed cheese or the fake cheeses and, got rid of all the packaged foods. And so now what we eat is basically the diet as outlined in Forks Over Knives, which is a whole food, plant-based diet. And we take it a step further. We have no oil, no added oil in our food other than oils found in whole foods like nuts, seeds, avocados, maybe a little coconut. No added oils whatsoever, no added salt. I mean, that's a rare occasion that we will have something with salt if we're on the road and we buy a packaged hummus or salsa or something like that that has a little salt in it. I don't flip out over that, but definitely no sugar. We don't eat any processed sugar at all. The only sweetness we have is from fruit and dried fruit. So my kids are now, like I said, 18 and 15. They love the way we eat. We have potlucks every month, and we have about 60 to 100 people that come. And the food is just always fantastic. The array of food, my kids love it. That we get new recipes, and we're all pretty healthy. Occasionally, somebody will get a cold, like right now, my son has one. But it usually lasts a couple days. It's very mild, and it doesn't spread throughout the house. So I can't say enough about this.
Yeah, you said so many amazing things there. I really appreciate your story. I think one of the things that stands out to me is the word transition. And just looking at, your story, it's been 30 years, right, for you? Or how many years has it been since you've been on the vegan path?
Since vegan, it's been about 8 or 9 years now.
8 or 9. And vegetarian for how long?
Oh, vegetarian since I was, in my 20s.
Okay.
Actually, my early 30s.
Early 30s. So I guess, my point to the listeners and viewers out there is one thing, first of all, of just noticing the transition and noticing how I think that there were pivotal points at different moments in your life where you determined that you wanted to take things to a different, what we might consider level. I think there's a lot of people who are probably right now hearing the word vegan or hearing the term plant-based whole foods. And some folks might be listening right now too, and they think, oh my gosh, like, ooh, overwhelming. How do I log off and go read a quick little fun article about puppies? I think that's a lot of people's approach initially to this. And so one of the things I want to just reiterate to people, because that happens even for me sometimes as I listen, but I'll tell you, 40 days ago versus today, I'm having a different emotional response listening to your story.
Right.
And so what I'm highlighting is that we are all at different places in our journey. For some people listening, you may have just now be hearing about whole foods plant-based. And there are other people that are saying, you know, my gosh, I've already been on this vegan, you know, train for a while, but now I'm starting to realize some of the things that you just mentioned about the processed foods and things like that. So we're all at a different place in this journey. But I think that, you know, the encouragement is let the body be the guide, and let your kind of that internal intuition, like you talked about, that voice you heard. I heard a similar voice, and I don't think that either of us are crazy. And if we both are, then what's it matter? But you know, I had a similar experience, and you know, talk about journey. With my journey before reaching out to you, it's been about 4 years since I saw Forks Over Knives, and I remember the first time I saw Forks Over Knives, having this initial experience, like, oh my gosh, there was something inside of me. I'm a spiritual guy. I felt like it was like a kind of like a God thing, where it felt like it was me, something inside me saying, this is an approach for you. Like, you know, you have so many, you can't argue this. Like, I couldn't argue with what they were saying. It was research based. And so I remember watching Forks Over Knives and just going, wow, I feel like I'm kind of called to do this. I had a strange peace about it. But of course, there was also some anxiety, like this, how would I give up meat? How will I give up cheese? You know, those were staples. I was mostly a paleo eater. So I had a similar feeling. And again, I think that as those of the people that are currently viewing and watching right now, you know, it's just really important to be kind of just pacing yourself at your own point in your journey, but listen to yourself. If this is something that you've had a similar experience where you felt like you watch Forks Over Knives, or you've been exposed to some plant-based vegan options, and something inside of you said, give this a shot, I think that's the point of entry. Because, you know, it took me 4 years of trying a little bit on my own here, a little bit on my own there, until I eventually reached out to you. And that was, you know, not even 60 days ago. And I had typed in on Google many times, plant-based coach. And this time, for whatever reason, I just felt like, you know, I wanted to go a step further. So I actually sent a couple emails. I sent one email to, I think it was Dr. Campbell and his institute that he has. And the other was to you. And it was basically just saying, hey, I'm a licensed therapist. This is my passion, to help people get healthy. But, you know, in my journey, I want to try this. I just feel like I need some extra support. And you responded right back, and you said, hey, let's chat. And, you know, the journey began. September 5th was my first day that I went, you know, really all in on this whole foods plant-based journey. And I could just share with you guys too, you probably have already heard this a lot from me, but, you know, all the things that Sharon just mentioned, they were so true for me right off the bat. You know, sometimes you don't know that you are living in poor conditions until you live in better conditions. I think that's really true for the way we feel. I see that a lot in the emotional state when I'm working with people around counseling. Sometimes you have people that are really depressed. You almost forget what it's like to be happy, or to have, you know, some consistency in your life. The same kind of goes for your body. You get so used to, I think I was mentioning this to you, Sharon, I was so used to, even when I was eating what I would consider clean meals, you know, which was mostly like 40 to 50 grams of protein, you know, lean protein and veggies. I was so used to having this like really sluggish feeling after meals. I just thought that's my body processing food, right? So you almost don't realize kind of the state you're living in until you live in a different one. And for me, what I noticed off the bat was when I started eating this way, that I started to all of a sudden feel energized after meals. And I thought, you know, this is crazy. This is only the way I usually feel after an espresso shot. And now I feel that way after food. You know, and so again, I want to just point out, Sharon just pointed out so many different amazing pieces of information. I call it going down the rabbit hole. You know, you've gone far down that rabbit hole, and that's where you live and reside. In the last 40 days, I've gone further down the rabbit hole than I ever thought I would. I didn't think I'd be sitting here 40 days from now saying, you know, it's been 40 days since I've had meat and cheese, and I don't miss it one bit. Right. But my point is, you know, if there's something inside of you, give this a shot. And let, you know, the proof's in the pudding. Let yourself really kind of see how your body reacts to this. And then start to really, from there, you know, let your body be the guide. And that's one thing that we've talked about. Your body can be such a good guide. One of the things that's so different about this approach is that you're not counting macronutrients. You're not counting calories, protein, carbohydrates. You're simply just eating based on what's kind of in your lane. And that's what I found to be such an amazing piece of this journey. So, again, let's kind of stay on that for a quick moment if we can. Sharon, there's people out there that are listening, they're watching, and they don't know a whole lot about being a vegan. They don't know a whole lot about plant-based whole foods eating, or maybe they've seen the documentary. How should someone know that it's time to give this a shot?
Well, again, I think it's like you said, the motivation must come from within. And if you're even thinking about it, if you're here, then it's time for you to think about it more. And watching Forks Over Knives is a great entry point. There are so many other wonderful documentaries. There's a new one called What the Health, which is fantastic. There are some great books. Like I said, T. Colin Campbell's book, the China Studies, fabulous. It is very heavy on the science, though, so it might be too much for some people. Another really good book is Dr. Michael Greger's How Not to Die. And Dr. Michael Greger runs a wonderful website called nutritionfacts.org, where he takes all of the papers that are published on nutrition in the literature, and he basically summarizes them all in a very easy to digest, pardon the pun, format, which is a video. And he's funny, and he interjects a lot of humor. So he wrote a book, I think it was last year, called How Not to Die, in which he addresses how food is related to some of the leading causes of death in our country. And it's very eye-opening. There's also a YouTube presentation of him talking about the book on YouTube, and it's fantastic and worth the watch. So there's, I've been filtering you a lot of information, posting a lot of it on your 30-day immersion page as well. But if you're thinking about it at all, just educating yourself is probably the best thing you can do. Don't necessarily try to make changes before you have a reason why. And then, after you read the information and you understand the connection between what you're putting into your body and your health, then I think you start to have to dig deep to find out your personal motivation. What is it that's important to you? And you and I have done some work around that, and you were pretty clear on your motivation, but I think you got even clearer as time went on. And I think that is a very important piece of the puzzle, because it's easy to change sometimes, but not necessarily to make sustainable change. You can try something for a few weeks or even, a few months, and then say, you know what, it's very easy to go off the wagon, because unfortunately, the way that we eat is somewhat counterculture these days. The movement is growing, but it's not the norm to eat whole food, plant-based food. It's just not. And it's crazy to me now, looking in at what people are actually eating. It's a little scary. I mean, I've gone to food courts and shopping malls sometimes and literally lost it and started to scream. And my husband just drags me out of there. I look around and say, "You're killing yourself." And he drags me out. He says, "You're the crazy one." And I say, "No, they're crazy. But the thing is, people don't know any better. They don't know any different." And the sad reality is that the medical profession in general, they are not taught this in medical school and in professional training. So there are lots of doctors now that are on board. They are educated. And that's a good point, is that if you're looking for a doctor who is in the know, there are some websites like plantbaseddocs.org that you can go to find a doctor in your area who is knowledgeable about this nutrition. Kaiser Permanente, which is the largest managed healthcare system in the country, endorses a whole food plant-based diet. In fact, if you Google Kaiser Permanente and plant-based diet, you'll see a paper that they put out for their physicians, and also a guide that you can download for transitioning. So if they're endorsing it, there must be something to it, right? And I can tell you just a personal story I'd like to share really quickly, condensed version for those who've heard it a million times. But my dad is now 80 years old. And when he lost my mom, he was eating a horrible diet. I mean, when she had cancer, her doctors were telling us she can eat whatever she wants. Now, my mom lived to eat. She loved food, and she didn't eat a good diet either. She barely ate vegetables. She loved dairy. She loved sweets. Sugar was her drug. I mean, she loved ice cream was her favorite food. And so my dad started to go along with her and eat that way. And so when she died, he was eating a lot of junk, and he was eating restaurant meals and fast food. And as I said, he was a kidney cancer survivor with one kidney. He also had gout. He had chronic migraines, chronic back pain, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, borderline type 2 diabetic. I mean, he
My
had
gosh.
so many problems. And the worst of it was when he came to me and he said, I'm losing my memory. I'm on, he was losing it and he couldn't recall things that he would say to me earlier. I'd have to hear the same stories over and over again. This is when he was,
How old was he at this time?
he was about 72, 73, something like that. And so I was at the time working with Dr. Barnard, and I said to him, what can I do with my dad? And he said, is he on any medications? And I said, yeah, he's on lots of them. He's on a blood pressure medication. He's on statin. He's on, antidepressants. And he said, those three medications in particular are linked to memory loss. You've got to get him off of those. And the only way to do that is to change his diet. Wow. So I kept telling my father over and over. Well, finally I took him in for his first physical since my mom had died. And his doctor said to me, do you have any concerns about your father? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, what? And I said, he eats way too much red meat. And the doctor turns to my dad and said, how much are you eating? And my dad says, 4 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week. And the doctor says, no, that's way too much. And so on the way out the door, my dad says to me, fine, I'll make you a bet. I'll bet you that I'll go without red meat for 3 weeks. I'm going to go back to the doctor and have my blood drawn. And if the doctor says everything's the same, you're taking me to Burger King, we're driving through the drive-thru, you're buying me a Whopper and you're watching me eat it. And I said, you know what? You're on, Dad. So 3 weeks later, I took him to the doctor. I said, Dad, do you feel any different? And I trusted him. He said, he promised me he wasn't eating red meat at that time. So I said, do you feel any different? And he said, no. So I'm praying the whole time there. I'm sitting in the waiting room. The next thing I know, the doctor comes out and high fives me and says, I don't know what you're doing with your father, but whatever it is, keep doing it. Wow. And what went on behind the scenes was that my dad goes back there. The doctor looks down at his blood work, looks up at him, looks down at the blood work again, looks up at him and says, what have you been doing? My dad says, nothing.
Magic pill. What is this?
Yeah. What is it? What are you taking? And my dad says, nothing. And the doctor kept saying, what are you doing, Carl? What are you doing? And he finally said, fine, why are you asking me this? And the doctor said, your blood pressure's down, your cholesterol dropped 20 points, you've lost 15 pounds. Don't tell me you haven't been doing anything. So my father always tells that story at our potlucks and meetups and says, I'm here because I lost a bet. So to make a long story short, he then gave up the chicken, and I'm Jewish, and for a Jewish man in his 70s to give up poultry is huge, but he did. He gave up chicken. He still eats a tiny bit of seafood, and I'm working on that, but he doesn't eat fish anymore. So he's really cleaned up his diet. He's off almost all of his medications. Unfortunately, in January, because of all the years that he smoked 5 packs a day, his arteries hadn't completely reversed. And again, he hasn't been 100% on this diet, but he had a heart attack. The good news is that the heart attack was caught in progress. There was no damage sustained by his heart, and they put a stent in, and he walked out 24 hours later and has been fine ever since. So the bad news is he's back on a statin, and he has to be on it for at least a little while. And he's very upset about that. And I said, Dad, if you want to get off the statin, you have to be 100%. Now for him, that's very challenging because his social life is getting together with people and eating in restaurants. And, it's very difficult to get an oil-free meal. And when you're a cardiac patient, you really can't have oil. You just can't have it. It's very damaging to the endothelial cells that line the arteries. And so he's still having it. So I'm working on that. But aside from that, he eats really clean. When he's with me, he's eating really clean. So he's 80 years old and literally is reverse aging. He has more energy now, more mental clarity, more emotional stability than he had in his early 70s. So it's been very gratifying. And I always say this because if somebody that age can do this, then anybody can do this. And he's also the most stubborn man on the planet. He always says, yeah, well, I gave birth to the most stubborn woman on the planet. But he is very stubborn. And if he can do this, anyone can. He cooks for himself. He makes himself these vegetable patties with flaxseed and cookies with oats and bananas. Amazing. I mean, yeah, it's really cool. But he does eat out a lot. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah, still working on it. Amazing. Like you said, I think there's people like 72 is something that, an age where I think a lot of people, there's people right now that are listening. They're like, I'm in my 40s. I'm in my 50s. I'm done. It's hard to, teach an old dog new tricks, sort of mentality. Yeah. And I think that's one of the empowering things about like you said, education, the education that comes from the China study, the education that comes from these books that you've mentioned. And we're going to link all that stuff in this link at the end. It really says that, no, once you learn this way of eating, that you really can take control of your health. It's something that a lot of people, I think, that we get stuck in this mindset, and particularly something that I can say from the work that I do around helping people rewrite your story is, some of us really have this belief of being powerless to certain foods. And I think one of the interesting things is, again, if a 72-year-old man who is known to be pretty stubborn and likes his red meat can really embrace this way of eating, the first thing people think is, God, he's 72 and he has the most incredible amount of willpower. But I would actually, again, tell people that that's one of the biggest misconceptions. There is no willpower, and I'm talking none, that people are using to eat this way. And that's, again, the biggest misconception, because before you go on it, you assume, I have to give up meat, I have to give up dairy. Wow, there is no way I have the willpower for that. Well, I'll tell you what, after about 48 hours, and you start to feel the difference, those cravings literally go away. And your dad is such a good example that, 72 years of eating one way, and even for him, it can be reversed. So what a powerful story. And it's funny, Sharon, you share that story with me, but one of the things that, that I'll add, if you're just kind of poking your head around into this plant-based whole food stuff, Forks Over Knives, the website, amazing recipes, for free database, amazing success stories. So in my 4 years of stubbornness that led me to you, I would occasionally just go on there and read stories. And it's funny because about 2 weeks into my journey, I'm sitting there just reading stories, and I'm reading about the 72-year-old guy who makes a bet with his daughter. And it was your story with your dad. I'm like, wait a minute, that's my coach. So we need to link that in this as well, so people can read that. It's a phenomenal story. And I've seen pictures of your dad, and he looks awesome. And you can tell he's got great energy. So yeah, just again, there's so many cool stories. I'm sure you've seen, if you want to maybe just hit us with the highlight reel of what are some of the most amazing transformations you've seen in someone's health, doing what you do, or just being in this community of the plant-based whole foods community. What are some of the most just incredible things that you've seen? And like you said, you almost wouldn't believe them, because at this point you're like, oh gosh, there's no way that really happened. What are some of the incredible things you've seen?
Well, one comes to mind, and I think her story is also written up in the Forks Over Knives testimonials that go out in the mail. But she came to our potluck. She had been vegan for a long time, but she was a junk food vegan. And I don't want to say her name.
So what's a junk food vegan?
Okay, sorry, I should explain that. So a junk food vegan is somebody, I was a junk food vegan initially. So just someone who's eating primarily for the ethical side of things. Not that that's a bad thing, because I'm also an ethical vegan, but somebody who doesn't, somebody who really doesn't care about the health aspect of things. And so the new Ben and Jerry's ice cream comes out, they're all over it. The next cheese comes out, they're all over that. They're looking for the processed versions of things they used to eat in the standard American diet. And that's what they live on. They're not concerned about their health. They may be overweight. They may still have high cholesterol and high blood pressure, but that's not their concern. They're just vegan. It's all about, does it have animal products? No, then it's a good food. So that's what I'm saying. Anyway, she was that type of eater. She was eating a lot of sugar. She loves sugar and salt and oil and a lot of processed foods. And she started to hear about this Forks Over Knives thing. And she was encouraged by one of our regulars to come to the meetup. And she came and she started eating this way. And I remember she came and did her testimonial at our potluck one time. And she said that she just could not believe what was happening for her. But she had chronic back pain. She was just in agonizing back pain forever. And she was a young, she wasn't that old. I mean, she was maybe 50s. And notice I say 50s young. I'm 55 now. So to me, 50s still
young. Good, I'm glad. That's super young. Yeah. No, I would agree.
But anyway, so she had been experiencing this back pain forever. And one day she got up and her back didn't hurt. And she said to her husband, oh my God, call 911. I think something's wrong.
Call 911. Wow.
She just didn't even know how to react to not having pain. And it's been gone since then. I think she's had maybe one slip up where she ate something with sugar and she had pain again. So she knows that that's what was causing it for her. That was a pretty dramatic one. And then I had one client one time who had really severe case of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and she was on all kinds of anti-inflammatory drugs that were causing her all kinds of side effects. And she started eating a healthier diet. And I remember her rheumatologist told her, it doesn't matter what you eat. And when she went back in for a visit, her markers had dropped way down and he was able to cut her medication. So that was pretty exciting. We've had people at our potlucks tell stories of even cancer that's gone into complete remission, just gone away, early stage cancer that's just disappeared. Now, of course, it's not a panacea. And this is not to say that this diet takes care of or cures everything, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Let's put it that way. You may still need some conventional intervention, but if you're feeding your body with the right fuel, it's just like I always tell people, it's like a race car. You have this beautiful, efficient race car and you put the wrong fuel in. How do you expect the performance to be? It's the same thing with your body. And the funny thing is, it's like Dr. Campbell always says, when you start putting the right fuel in, when you start eating real whole foods in their natural state, it cures so many things. It's not just one thing, as you've noted. It's digestive issues, it's sleep, it's mental clarity, it's energy level, it's skin. I mean, there's so many things go away, pain. People see all kinds of improvements in their health. And one point I do want to make, and something I'm always careful about telling my clients, is don't beat yourself up for not being perfect. I mean, it's a tough transition, and I did it over decades. Even if you make a small change, like if you replace your McDonald's morning sandwich, with the Egg McMuffin or whatever, with a bowl of steel cut oats and berries, you'll see an improvement in your health. The question is, how much or how dramatic of an improvement do you want to see? And obviously, when you're ready, if you can move up to the next step, then you'll see even more improvements in your health. And it's a gradual refinement. So you don't have to go from, 0 to 100 overnight. It may take you some time to get there. And I think you're seeing that in your own life. You have to make it something that integrates into your lifestyle. Otherwise, it's just not sustainable. So now some people, I will qualify that by saying some people see the movie Forks Over Knives, decide overnight they're going whole food, plant-based, 100%, and they may have a health crisis. They may have just gotten a diagnosis. They may have just been told by their doctor, and I've had people refer to me from their physician saying, I don't want to go on a statin. I've told my doctor I'm going to change my diet, and they're really determined, and they'll do it 100%. But if you don't have that hanging over your head, it might be a little harder for you to completely jump on ship, especially if all the people in your life are eating the standard American diet. It becomes even more difficult. So one of the big things, and you and I have talked about this many times, is you have to find a community of like-minded people. And that's why I started the meetup group in my area, which started in 2011 when the Forks Over Knives movie came out. And it's basically exploded since then. But that's why I started it, is because I was teaching my classes, I was working with clients, and they would do great when they were with me. But then when they weren't with me, they'd go out with their families to a party or to a dinner, and they got derailed completely. And so I realized it was because that community, that support, the group support was not there for them. So if you can find a group, go on meetup.com, look around on various Facebook pages that are about plant-based nutrition, see if there's a meetup group in your area, or even connect with someone virtually. There are all these different pages, like your 30-day immersion page. There's a Forks Over Knives Engine 2 page. I mean, there's so many different places on Facebook and other social media where you can go to connect with people. But I always say, find your community. And if you can't find one, if you really can't find one, then go on meetup.com and start a meetup group. Even if you connect with a few people and start doing a small potluck at your home, or even meeting in a restaurant that will give you food that is, suitable, it's a great way to get that group support, which is absolutely imperative if you make sustainable change.
Yeah, I mean, so many amazing nuggets in there. I mean, the community stuff, a lot of what you're saying, you talk a lot about why, know your why, and then also to your support system. These are actual stages that people who are familiar with my online program know. These are some of the 8 stages. Know your why being stage number 2, and then stage 8 being your support system that speaks the language. And in a lot of ways, that's exactly what you're saying. In order to be successful, we have to have that community around us. And I'll save some of you that are in the Sacramento area the trouble of looking and finding this information. Linda Middlesworth, many of you saw the video that I had shared with her story. She is one of those folks that has that extreme, headline of actually reversing cancer through eating this way, in addition to many other things. But she runs the Sacramento Vegan Society. She's here in Sacramento. She's amazing. She is so helpful. And so that's a great meetup group that you can join. So there's community built in right into that. And there's something else that I'll say too. I've had an opportunity to work with lots of different, folks that are in the health industry, and all of them have the same passion to help people. But I'll tell you what, I've been blown away by the approach that I've seen from the plant-based whole foods community. And I've shared this with you, but just this feedback of, like you're a coach, right? But you're not too worried about referring me to another coach in my area and afraid like, oh no, is she gonna steal my business? There's just such a heavy focus on wanting to help people. Right. And that really shines through and I see it just everywhere. There's so much amazing, free, good information. And that's one thing I'll say that, that kind of got me, because, I thought to myself when I watched Forks Over Knives, I'm like, who's really making, usually when someone's pitching something to you, there's an angle and you could see it. So I'm like, where's the angle here? Are they, are all these people in bed with the farmers, right? The people who make the onions and the zucchini, like, and I thought, no, this is just people who genuinely have experienced transforming their lives, and they truly want to pay it forward. And so I just think that's so amazing. Doesn't that seem like that's something so unique to this community? Don't you experience that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many people just donating their time doing this work, people going, even physicians using their valuable time going on Facebook Live and doing webinars. I mean, there's just so much giving in this community. And it's like you said, I don't worry about giving another coach business, because I feel like the people who are meant to come to me will come to me.
Awesome.
As long as I get the message out there, I
yeah.
really don't care who you go to. Of course, I'd love to help you if you're local, but if you're not local and you want to find a local coach, or if there's a meetup group in your area, I just encourage people. I'm really glad that you met Linda. She is such an awesome force in this community. She's amazing. I think she's 62 years old and she looks like she's in her 40s.
She's 72 and
oh,
she
72.
looks like she's
I'm
in
sorry.
her 40s.
See?
Yeah.
I always forget her age. The woman has so much energy and so much passion around what she does. She's really, really, truly amazing. I adore her.
Easy mistake to make with her.
Yeah. You forget. She
Yep.
posted something on Facebook the other day, and my daughter looked at her and said, "Oh my gosh, she looks like a fashion model." She really does. She's amazing. But
I've had, so many people have seen those videos and said the same thing.
Yeah. But so it is a very giving community, and it's like you said, it's not really money driven. I mean, does that mean there isn't money to be made in this industry? Of course there is. There are people selling meal plans and people selling packaged food and people selling health coaching, which, I basically make my money from doing my classes and my health coaching, but I do a lot of things for free. I mean, my meetup is basically free. The meetups that I organize throughout the month are free. I've done events like movie premieres, and I don't make money on them. So, I do a lot for free too. I'm always on Facebook answering people's questions. If anybody emails me, I always answer their questions. So I know I give a lot of my time. And if I was making all the money in the world and I had, no need to do anything else, I would still do this work. I mean, I really, my passion. And I know most of us who are doing this work feel the same way.
Yeah. I 100%, of course, vouch for that because I've seen it live and in action. Even having you come on a Facebook Live, a little story to share with some folks is that, right off the bat, I said, okay, Sharon, we'll get one, coaching session under our belt and we'll go on Facebook Live. And, I definitely want to make sure that to promote your coaching business. And she said, whoa, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. I want to make sure that you're dialed in first. And, there was just like you said, there really is a genuine, caringness that you have, and it shines through, some different aspects of what, it means for Sharon to be your coach, because I'm experiencing that now with her, is that, I keep meal logs, which there's a lot of things that I haven't done ever, surprisingly. It's been a long time since I've kept a meal log. I'll tell clients that that it's not a bad idea to keep one. And but for me, I've just never done that. So not only am I keeping one, but Sharon reviews it daily. And so I have the opportunity to get comments and feedback from Sharon on, hey, what have you thought about trying this substitute? So there's always tons of information that's flying at me. And a lot of times it's planting seeds that I come back to in a week or two, where I'm going to plan my meals. Tons of great videos that you've sent along too, or books. So it's just been such, as you said, again, when I think about, what I'm paying to have you be my coach, it looks like it's set up to just be the time that we interact, but really there's so much more time that you've spent, giving back. And again, I know you won't plug your coaching business, but I'm going to definitely plug it. And I'm going to make sure there's a link in here, because if anyone's looking for help, Sharon, you are in Maryland, and, you and I met. I'm here in California, and we're at a 3-hour difference, and we've made it work. And,
Yep.
I would say there's been no limitations whatsoever to have you being where you're at. It's been tremendous. So yeah, I hope you're open to some more people reaching out if they're interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always happy to help.
Yeah. So let's do like a little rapid fire. This has been awesome. We're going to do more of these too with you. But I want to just do some rapid fire questions that come to mind that I think some people might be having if they're listening right now. And we're really catering this to the folks that are not in right now currently eating whole foods plant-based, right? They're looking at us like, you guys are crazy for even doing this vegan thing. Again, you must have all the willpower in the world. I don't have it. So I want to kind of speak to some of their concerns. So let's talk about the P word. Let's talk about protein. And again, I'm not the health expert. I'm not the MD. I'm a therapist. Can you speak to, just from your approach, the belief around protein? The number one question I've gotten so far is, Armando, and they'll look me dead in the eyes and grab me, and it's coming from a place of love, but it's like, are you getting enough protein? but where are you getting your protein from? So can you speak to some folks right now that their biggest obstacle to transitioning into trying this way of eating is the P word, protein? Can you talk to them a little bit more about protein? And just speak to that a little bit.
There are so many great answers to that question. And a friend of mine came to an event I hosted this past weekend, and she said that her new answer to that question, when somebody says, where do you get your protein? She says, I don't, I'm going to die soon.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry.
So funny.
I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Yeah. The point is, well, first of all, I'd like to start by saying, from what everything I've heard from all the medical doctors that I've talked to, is there has never been a diagnosed case of protein deficiency in this country. Okay. And that, with the exception of people who are not eating enough calories. So the bottom line is, they all have amino acids, which are the constituents of protein, and our bodies synthesize those amino acids into complete proteins. And you don't have to worry about protein complementation, in your meals. You don't have to worry about having rice and beans in the same meal. Your body knows exactly what to do. It takes in all the food, it breaks it all down into amino acids, it puts them all back together in exactly the format it needs to get the amino acids it needs. I'm sure there are rare exceptions. Some people need taurine, which is something you get out of meat, and they have to take a supplement, but I think that's very rare from my understanding. So
people can survive eating this way without counting the macronutrient known as protein.
Yeah, if you're eating a balanced diet of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans and legumes, and nuts and seeds, if you're eating those foods in a balanced way, so you're not just eating one food, just one vegetable, for example, you wouldn't get enough calories doing that. But if you're eating a balanced diet, you will get all the protein that you need and more. And Dr. Garth Davis wrote a wonderful book called Proteinaholic, which I know I'm
reading it right now.
It's a great book. And on his website, proteinaholic.com, he has a calculator. So you can go there, you plug in your height and your weight and your age and your gender, and it tells you exactly how many grams of protein you need. And I think they say the average woman needs about 46 or something like that. So 46. Bottom line is something like that. I think I came out to need a lot less than that, 30 something. But if you look at the number of grams in the various whole foods, beans in particular are super high in protein, whole grains are very high in protein, and nuts and seeds are very high in protein. So if you're eating those in your diet, you will get more than enough protein. And you know, when you ask, where did this whole notion of protein being so important come from? Well, it came from the meat and dairy industries. There was money in that, right? We're talking about there's no money in broccoli, as one of the talk show hosts likes to say, but there's a lot of money in meat and dairy and in those industries. So bottom line is, it's a myth, and there are many people eating this way who are bodybuilders. They're getting more than enough protein. If you just Google vegan bodybuilding, you'll see
NFL players right now. We're seeing a
NFL
huge
players,
movement in the NFL.
exactly, all types of athletes, and people find that actually their endurance and their performance improves when they stop eating animal protein in favor of plant protein. And you don't have to worry about powdered plant proteins and those sorts of, you know,
that's a big point. That's a big point.
You really don't have to do that. If you are an endurance athlete, Dr. Joel Furman has a great paper on vegan athletes. You can Google, that'll come up as a PDF. And he talks about some of the sources that are higher in protein, like Mediterranean pine nuts and hemp seeds, and of course, beans and legumes, and, you know, how to work those into your diet in higher quantities. But in all honesty, I haven't seen anyone tell me, oh, they're protein deficient, and, you know, that's been a problem. So you'll get, I mean, if you think about it, where does the cow get its protein? Where's the gorilla get its protein? They're vegetarians. They don't eat meat. So, you know, those are big, strong animals, and they're getting it directly from the source, which is the whole foods, the whole plant foods. So you don't need to worry about your protein.
Yeah, that's so huge, because again, I'll just tell you from my own experience, again, coming from eating mostly paleo, that was one of my biggest concerns. You know, in fact, out of all of the amazing books, and I have a list on Amazon right now that I've accumulated of all the book recommendations I've gotten from you and from others. Out of all of the books, I was like, you know, I think the one I need to start with is Proteinaholic, because for me, that was the biggest barrier, was really saying to myself, you know, when I initially started my first week, okay, I'm going to go buy a vegan-based protein powder. I remember you putting in the notes, why are you doing this? And I'm thinking, because I need to get enough protein. So I think it's something that's so ingrained in us. And, you know, there's a lot of folks that I know and truly respect in weight loss, you know, culture, who will talk about the importance of protein. And, you know, I guess my best thing that I'd say about that, again, is that that's not my lane, so I'll stay out of it. But what I can tell you is that looking at my blood test results, something I posted on my Dr. Mondo website, check that out. I did a video around it. But something I noticed in my blood test results is that, you know, I weighed probably, you know, maybe 20 pounds lighter than I am now, maybe a little bit more. And my cholesterol numbers, and is it the HDL? Is that the bad one, or that's the good one? What's the bad or the
HDL
good
is the good one. LDL is the
bad.
the
LDL. My LDL, the bad cholesterol, that was at an all-time low after 30 days of being whole foods plant-based. And my cholesterol was at an all-time low after being 30 days whole food plant-based. So again, that was, even when I weighed less, there wasn't as much of a positive impact on my blood test results. So again, I just, you know, want to point that out to people that, you know, protein, I think, is related to weight loss. Also consider is, what's the impact that some of these things are having on our health? Looks like we're going to get Sharon back in here. But again, so, you know, if that's something that you're noticing that, you know, hey, as I'm firing Sharon back up, you can lose weight on a really high protein diet. And again, everyone's on their own journey. I'm just cautious because I got so many, no problem. I got so many friends out there that I built relationship with, and I don't want to step on any toes, but all I want to say is this, that sometimes weight loss and, you know, your blood panels are, maybe they're two different things. You know, I'm losing weight right now, but my blood tests are showing that I'm in a better place than I've ever been before. And that's only after 30 days. And I plan on going back after 60 days, after 90 days, and continuing to post those results. So, you know, again, it's just something that you can't ignore, but you spoke to the big one that I have, which is on protein. So again, we'll be okay. No one's going to die here,
right,
from protein deficiency. Number one documentary, not named Forks Over Knives, not named What the Health, that if you had an opportunity to put in front of someone, you were conscious of scaring them off, you were conscious of, they were just brand new and their interest is a little bit piqued, what's the number one documentary that you're going to recommend to someone to watch? Other than Forks Over Knives, other than What the Hell?
Wow. Okay. So it really depends on their angle. Why are they peaked? If it's
Yeah.
health, I really would have to say those two movies.
Yep.
If it's they're just curious, Vegucated is one that I showed my kids. Vegucated is about the filmmaker goes out on the streets of New York and challenges 6 people to go vegan for I think a month or something like that.
Yeah, I just watched that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
the reason I showed it to my kids when they were younger was because I wanted them to see every aspect. And one of the aspects that is discussed in that movie a little bit is the animal ethical side of things. And
Right,
so it
right.
showed a deserted slaughterhouse. It's not too graphic, it was just enough. So that's maybe something I'd consider. There's Eating You Alive, which is another really good one that's more recent. And I think there's one called Eating. There are just so many. I mean, honestly, we can put a list of them up on your page.
We should. Yeah, we will. I'm going to turn this Facebook Live into a blog post where we have all the links that we've mentioned here.
Yeah. And the one
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, one I want to mention that is a lot more graphic and really sealed the deal for me. I think you already have to be eating this way before you can watch this movie. But if you are eating this way and you're kind of, on and off the wagon, watch the movie Earthlings, because
I've heard that.
that one I had to literally, I watched it like this. And once you see the footage of the way that the animals are treated and where your meat comes from and where your dairy comes from, those images are burned into your brain and you will never go back. I mean, it's just, I think you come into this initially, a lot of people, not everyone, of course, but a lot of people come into it for health. And then they're able to see, once they're eating that way, there's not as much cognitive dissonance. And then they are able to see the other sides of it. The environment, for example, the environmental impact. The movie Cowspiracy is a brilliant one.
That one got me.
Yeah, that one's really, really intense. So that's a really good one. But if you're coming in from the ethical side of things, if you're someone who really loves animals, and I think Linda Middlesworth is like that. She initially came in for health and then really got passionate about the animals. So when you watch Earthlings, that kind of seals the deal there. I didn't want to show that one to my kids. It was just way too graphic. But Vegucated kind of gets you in the door. But Cowspiracy is another really good one. It just makes you see all the other aspects of eating this way in addition to health. When it comes to health, I have to say my favorite of all time is still going to be Forks Over Knives. There's another one called Plant Pure Nation. Plant Pure Nation was good too.
Really good follow-up to Forks Over Knives.
Yeah, that was a good one too. So those are my favorites.
Yeah, and I'll just say, to that too, again, if you're someone that is watching this and you are just thinking about putting your toe in the water, just stick to Forks Over Knives, really. Yeah. That's what I tell people. And I'm almost saying that, wait, if you had to have a movie a week, so watch Forks Over Knives to get you started. And then a weekend, watch What the Health, because then What the Health speaks to a lot more of the kind of the socio-political things that are surrounding the food industry. And then I would say, watch Plant Pure Nation a couple weeks in, and then start going further down the rabbit hole as you're ready for it. Cowspiracy is one that I would definitely throw in there, amongst the ones that you've mentioned. I'm just picking a few, but I think what I've noticed for me, and it took about 30 days for this to happen, is, I've never been someone to kind of sit here and go oh, I'm really thinking about the environment a lot. I might do things that help the environment, but the reality is that, I ride my bike. I don't have a car right now, but that's more for convenience and more for my own selfishness of, I like riding my bike. Oh yeah. And it helps the environment, but I'm not going to go around telling people that I ride my bike for the environment, because that's not really what it's all about for me. But what's been really interesting is that Cowspiracy was the film that got me to start to get outside of myself and start to look at the bigger picture here. You hear so much about global warming, you hear so much about carbon gas emissions, and never have I ever pretended to understand that stuff. I cared about it, of course, especially when you have kids, you start caring more. But what was so interesting to me was to learn through that documentary that the number one, and again, you're gonna have to help me put this all together. It's not my forte, but essentially what I learned from that film was that the number one form of carbon gas emission is basically the agricultural community of what it takes, livestock, what it takes to all the resources it takes, the amount of water it takes, the amount of grains it takes, the amount of rainforest, the amount of area that has to be plowed just to raise cows and just to produce 1 pound of beef. It's these astronomical numbers. And then you talk about, of course, cows put out methane through some of their own emissions. And you start to look at all of that. And I'd never stopped to think like, wow, there is such a disconnect between my consumption of these foods and what they're actually doing into the environment. And then you start hearing some of these numbers about what's happening to our planet. And you start realizing, oh my gosh, like I can actually make an impact. I think that's one of the reasons why people don't vote, or people don't go out and do things like this, is because they think, what, it's a drop in the bucket. What can I do, right? I'll make sure the lights are switched off when I leave home. But you can really make an impact on your carbon footprint by consuming less animal products. And that's something that just blew me away. And again, you said it so well. I wouldn't start off there because we're all selfishly motivated. We're motivated to reduce our cholesterol. We're motivated to live longer and be around for our kids. All good selfish motivations, but we're motivated first by the health. But what's interesting is, don't be surprised if 30 days into this, what keeps you kind of rooted in this movement a bit more is learning more about the environment. And that's where I'm at now. And I'll tell you, Linda's mentioned it, you've mentioned it, Sharon. I'm kind of like holding up Earthlings, which was produced, I think, and directed by Joaquin Phoenix. This is the one that I'm like, okay, because I love animals, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that one. Vegucated showed me a little bit of the glimpse into that, and it got me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I'm tentative to. I know that once I see that, it's going to be hard to unsee it, and it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Well, the other thing is, for me, not only did it raise my awareness about the food part of it, but at the time, as a makeup artist, I was in the fashion, industry, so to speak, and I was carrying a lot of beautiful not vegan, but beautiful leather bags and wearing beautiful leather shoes. And it made me realize, oh my gosh, like these are derived from animals too that didn't deserve to suffer. And so I got rid of all my leather, all my wool, all my silk, all these things, beeswax, things that you don't even think about on a day-to-day basis. But once you start eating a whole food plant-based diet, you realize there are animals that are sacrificed for so many reasons that they don't need to be. So again, that side of it for me was secondary. Some people never get there. I'm not sure if my dad's there, honestly. I don't know if he'll ever get there. I remember one year I went to a conference called Vegetarian Summerfest at Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is held every summer. And I came home saying, oh my God, Dad, the animals. And he said to me, now you're turning into a hippie. You sound like one of those hippies. And he was very critical.
I was just thinking how many people who just like popped in right now are like, oh my gosh, like this is a couple of, hippies. I don't have the long hair to like fully be hippies.
Tie-dye shirts.
But and you can't see my Birkenstocks, but they're clearly on because it came with my vegan starter kit.
Right.
As I hit day 40, that was my gift to myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, people have these stereotypes, right? And it is something that keeps us from really kind of going there, or even trying this. I had a few friends who I'm close with, who joked with me and said, I'm really considering doing this whole foods plant-based thing, but man, I am not playing hacky sack with you. I'm not sitting Indian style with you. I'm not that flexible. I'm like, well, wait, your inflammation is going to go away. You don't know. We might be playing a little hacky sack in the park.
True. Yeah, it's fun.
And, doing a drum circle. Yeah, but I think that's kind of what you touched on earlier too. We're at an interesting time right now because we live in such a health conscious time. And what's starting to happen again is that there are so many people now that are becoming engaged and aware of whole foods, plant-based eating, veganism. And, it's starting to become a little bit of a buzz, word again. And in some ways, I think some folks like yourself who've probably been rooted in it probably go, that probably leads to some bandwagon folks doing it for all the wrong reasons or doing all the processed, foods. But at the end of the day, I think what that's also doing is it's producing more options. Like I live here in Sacramento. There's tons of options right now to where you can go out and get an amazing, I just did an article on it on my website, where you can get an amazing whole foods plant-based meal. Now, again, it's still going to probably, even if you tell them to hold the oil, there's certain things that aren't going to be fully adherent. But if you're at your initial stages of your journey, I think part of what your biggest fear is, I know it was for me, was, oh no, my world is shrinking. It's gone, right? Like I can't go anywhere. I can't eat anything. And so I think it's important to let people know that, you know, that the identity of veganism is really transforming. It's no longer just the hippies, and it's happening all around us. And when you start, it's just like buying a red sports car, right? Everywhere you go, you see them. And when you start to eat this way, you go out to restaurants, you go, oh my gosh, there's a V next to this thing on the menu.
Right.
I never even noticed that. Or like right now in Sacramento, we have the Vegan Chef Challenge. I never knew this happened in the month of October. All of these restaurants, over 32 that are traditionally non-vegan, are offering a vegan menu to participate and show that they can also offer vegan, whole foods, plant-based options. So really, again, we're living in an interesting time. And if you look around, there's just such a great opportunity to take advantage of trying this out and giving it a shot. You know, I always say the proof is in the pudding, and I'm not sure
The
where
chia
pudding
pudding.
stands on
Chia pudding.
the proof is in the chia pudding, and give the chia pudding a shot. And if at the end of a week or at the end of 14 days, your body doesn't feel different, you don't have better energy, you're not sleeping better, some of the chronic stuff isn't going away, then guess what? Ditch it.
Yeah.
Why, if it's all about willpower for you, ditch it. But what do you have to lose? I mean, that was the point I got to. What do I have to lose to really give this a shot and go in for 14 days? We mentioned some resources, and we'll kind of end on that. There are resources that we're going to give you. We're going to throw them at you. We're going to put this on a blog post. I do a 30-day plant-based immersion group, no charge. It's just a bunch of people getting in this group to share meals, recipe ideas, to share success stories, to motivate one another. There's a ton of different vegan things you can join in your community through social media, through the meetup groups, and we'll give you links to all of that stuff. But again, if you're listening to this was the first of probably a few of these that we'll do. This was kind of like your introductory, your little primer. If you have questions, feel free to leave them here in this post, and we will do our best to see if Sharon can't answer some of them. So
one thing I just want to
Sharon,
throw in, or
throw it in.
One resource that is completely free online is by PCRM. It's called 21 Day Kickstart. So you sign up the first of the month, you go to 21daykickstart.org. and you register your email address there. And starting on the first of the month, you get an email in your inbox every day for 21 days. And the emails have recipes, little video clips, tips, endorsements by celebrity vegans. And it's just a great resource that's completely free. So you might want to take full advantage of that, even if you're doing another program at the same time.
Yeah, I would say that one is absolutely awesome. I did that. You had me sign up for it. It was great. The more you can saturate this stuff, yourself in this stuff, you know, like all the different pages out there, plant-based, you know, cooking and live kindly, you know, like all those pages, have it inundate your news feed. That way it doesn't feel like it's so hard or it's so strange. You know, I look at my Instagram feed now and I look at my Facebook feed and it's got all this, you know, stuff around like whole foods, plant-based eating. And so I go on there, it's a source of motivation, inspiration, as opposed to me having to like sift through the news feed to find these little nuggets that would inspire me. So you can transform it one thing at a time. And again, I think the big takeaway, we've gone down the rabbit hole really far. We've come back up. Regardless of where you are at today, the whole reason that we're doing this is just to give you guys information about whole foods, plant-based eating. I feel terrific after, you know, doing over 40 days of this. And I keep saying I'm not going to call myself a vegan just yet because I'm afraid of what that will do if I put that term on. I'm not ready to play hacky sack every day. But what I will say is that I'm taking it day by day, and I have no plans today or tomorrow of eating any other way than whole foods, plant-based. Each day has become a greater challenge. Having my coach Sharon here has really allowed me to challenge myself. And here's the thing. It's not a challenge based on willpower. It's not a challenge based on adherence to some model of eating. It's a challenge based on, wow, if I could substitute that with this and I could actually feel better, I'm interested. So that's kind of what it's been like. It's such a different transformational journey than I think a lot of us are used to when it comes to our health and our food choices. So anyway, I know that we're proselytizing to, you know, preaching to everyone about, you know, how we feel on this. And we just wanted to do this to give you guys some more info. We will link it all. We'll put it in a blog article. We'll throw it your way. Sharon is linked on here if you want to get in touch with her. You can go ahead and Sharon, what's your website so that you can let everyone know where to find you?
It's Eat Well, all one word, EATWELL -staywell.com.
eatwell-staywell.com. We'll put a link to that one in there too. You can reach out to Sharon like I did. If you're interested in having her do some coaching with you, highly recommended. But other than that, the other thing you can do is follow my Dr. Mondo page, which is slowly kind of just, again, there's more of this stuff seeping into it. And it's just because I believe you have to live your journey transparently. And this is just right now what's going on in my journey, in addition to all the work that I'm doing around the psychology, around weight loss transformation. This is what's happening in my world. So I feel like I have a duty to share it. And we'll continue to share it over the Dr. Mondo page. So like that page if you haven't already. And I think that's about all we can plug. Sharon, again, thank you so much. What time is it over there?
You're welcome. It's almost 8 o'clock actually. So.
It's almost 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're taking up your evening over here. We're just getting ready to start the evening here in California.
You're so lucky.
Lucky, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, thank you so much, Sharon. And again, just really appreciate your time today. And we look forward to continuing these Facebook Lives with you.
You're welcome. Great.
Yeah. You guys have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Take care.